The morning rush had just begun at La Bellina Cafe, that little corner shop that smelled like roasted coffee and second chances. Sunlight spilled through the windows, catching the steam rising from mugs and the golden dust floating in the air. Lena Carter balanced 3 plates on her arm like she was born doing it. Even though it wasn't skill, just survival. You learn to move quietly when life's taught you that attention isn't always safe. Behind the counter, Marco called out, "Order up, table 7. Lena froze. Table 7. Everyone in the cafe knew what that meant. That was his table. He'd been coming in every morning for 3 weeks. Same time, 7:15 sharp, never late by even a minute. Always alone, though 2 men in suits waited by a black Bentley parked outside. He'd order 1 espresso, no sugar, no cream, drink it slowly, and leave. No one knew his name, but everyone knew how to act when he arrived. Quieter, straighter, smaller. Lena took a breath, grabbed the cup, and started toward him. The man sat in the corner booth, back to the wall, like someone who never trusted the world enough to face it. His suit was dark gray, his tie precise, his eyes unreadable, not brown, not black, somewhere in between, cold, steady, dangerous. "Your espresso, sir," Lena said, trying to sound steady. He looked up at her. "Thank you," he said, voice low, controlled, but it carried a quiet power that made her heart stumble. She tried to step back, but his gaze held her like gravity. "You're new," he said. Lena blinked. "No, sir. I've been here 8 months." He gave a faint nod, almost dismissive, and looked away. Just like that, she was invisible again. She turned, relief washing through her, until her elbow brushed a chair. The saucer clinked, her cheeks flushed hot, and then, softly, unexpectedly, she heard him chuckle. It was small, almost human, but somehow, that made it worse. Back at the counter, Marco grinned. "You okay?" Lena exhaled shakily. "Yeah, just another day." But it wasn't. Something about the way he looked at her, like she'd been seen for the first time, stuck with her. Hours later, when the rush died down, sunlight painted the tables gold. Lena was wiping down a booth when her sleeve slipped up, revealing the tiny tattoo on her wrist, a delicate pattern of stars forming Cassiopeia. Her dad had helped her draw it years ago before he passed away. He'd told her, "When you can't find your way, look up! The stars never forget where you belong!" The bell above the door jingled. She turned. "Welcome to—" Her words faltered. It was him, the man from table 7. Only this time, he wasn't alone. One of the men from the Bentley followed him in, tall, broad, face unreadable behind dark glasses. Every sound in the cafe seemed to disappear. He walked straight up to the counter. "You," he said quietly. Lena froze. "Sir?" "I need to speak with you." Marco blinked. "Sir, she's working." "Take a break," the man said. It wasn't a suggestion. Marco's eyes flicked to Lena's. "You can use the office," he said softly. Lena's pulse raced. She followed the man to the back room, small, cluttered, the hum of the fridge the only sound. When the door clicked shut behind them, it felt like the air disappeared. He took 1 step closer. "Your wrist," he said. "What about it?" "Show me." His tone wasn't threatening, but it wasn't gentle either. It was the kind of voice that expected to be obeyed. Something inside her screamed not to, but her body didn't listen. She slowly pulled up her sleeve, revealing the constellation inked on her skin. He inhaled sharply. "Cassiopeia," he whispered. Lena nodded slowly. "Yeah, I designed it myself." His jaw clenched. "No, you didn't." Her brows furrowed. "Excuse me?" He looked at her then, really looked, and in his eyes was something strange. Shock, pain, hope. "My wife," he said quietly. "She had the same tattoo, exactly the same, in the same place." Lena's stomach dropped. "Had? She died 5 years ago," he said, voice heavy. "Car accident. Her body was never found." Lena shook her head. "I'm sorry. But it's just a coincidence. People get constellations all the time." "Not like this," he cut in. His eyes locked on hers. "She designed this exact pattern herself." She swallowed hard. "That's impossible. I drew this after my dad died. I've had it for years." Silence hung between them. Then he spoke again. "What's your name?" "Lena Carter." He repeated it softly like he was testing how it felt to say, "Lena, I'm Nico DeLuca." The name hit her like ice water. She'd heard it whispered before, in news stories, in rumors, in the way people said it like a warning. Nico DeLuca, the man the city feared. "Why are you interested in my tattoo, Mr. DeLuca?" she asked, trying to sound brave. He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Because if I'm right, that tattoo might be the reason you're still alive." Lena's heart thundered. She wanted to speak, to move, to run, but she couldn't. She just stared into those dark eyes and whispered, "What are you talking about?" His voice dropped low. "Because my wife had it, and she was pregnant when she died." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud about to break. And for the first time that morning, Lena realized maybe it wasn't her past that was about to change. Maybe it was his. And right here, before we move on, let me ask you something. If you were Lena, standing in that small office, face to face with a man who could destroy or protect you, would you show him the tattoo? Or would you run? Tell me what your gut says. Because trust like that, it's how whole stories change. Hey, before we continue, if you're feeling the story so far, please tap that subscribe button, drop a like, and share this with someone who loves deep stories too. And let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. Now let's return to the moment everything changed. The cafe emptied out slowly that afternoon, leaving behind the faint smell of roasted beans and rain on pavement. Outside, the city hummed with a rhythm that didn't belong to Alara Quinn anymore. It moved too fast, too loud, too alive. She'd been working at La Bellina Cafe for 8 months, and in that time she'd learned every sound it made. The hiss of the espresso machine, the scrape of the broom on the tiled floor, the low hum of Marco's radio playing old Italian love songs. But inside, Alara's world was quiet, always quiet. She lived in a rented one-room apartment above a laundromat, the kind of place where the walls were too thin and the neighbors too curious. Her days were predictable. Wake up before dawn, tie her hair in a messy bun, serve strangers who never really looked at her, then go home and pretend the silence didn't swallow her whole. People thought she was shy, but shyness wasn't the reason she kept to herself. It was self-preservation. Because Alara had learned a long time ago that the safest secrets were the ones buried so deep you forgot they ever existed. That night, she sat on her small bed, wrapped in an old sweater that still smelled faintly of her father's cologne. He'd died when she was 20. Cancer. Quick and cruel, leaving behind nothing but memories and the telescope they used to share. She looked down at the tattoo on her wrist. Cassiopeia. 5 tiny stars, each inked for one of the stories he used to tell her about finding light even in the darkest skies. Her fingertips brushed the ink softly. "You'd laugh if you saw me now, Dad," she whispered. Still waiting for something to make sense. The words hung in the stillness of her room, unanswered. The next morning came too soon. Alara returned to the cafe before sunrise, as she always did, unlocking the front door while the streetlights still flickered. The air smelled like new beginnings, but she'd stopped believing in those. By 7 o'clock, the tables were half full. Marco chatted with a supplier, and Alara wiped down the counter, pretending her hands weren't shaking. Because she knew he'd be there soon. Nico DeLuca, the man whose gaze had unsettled her yesterday, the man who'd said his wife had worn the same tattoo, the same constellation that her father had drawn for her years ago. She'd almost convinced herself she'd imagined it, until the bell above the door rang. He walked in. Same time, same posture. Same cold presence that made the air shift around him. Only this time there was no espresso order. He stopped in front of the counter. "Alara," he said softly. Her name sounded different in his mouth. Heavier, almost reverent. "You remembered," she murmured before she could stop herself. His lips curved faintly. "I remember many things." Her stomach tightened. "You shouldn't be here." "And yet," he said, "here I am." He glanced toward the corner booth, then back to her. "A few minutes, please." She hesitated. Every instinct screamed to stay away, but something in his voice, quiet, controlled, almost pleading, made her nod. They sat at his usual table. The silence between them was fragile, like glass. He reached into his jacket and placed a photograph on the table. A woman stared back, dark hair, soft smile, her wrist resting gently on a rounded belly. Alara's breath caught. The woman looked like her, not exactly, but enough to make her skin prickle. "This is my wife, Sophia," Nico said quietly. "She was 5 months pregnant when her car went into the lake. They said it was an accident. I never believed that." Alara's gaze flicked to the photo, to the familiar shape of the tattoo on the woman's wrist. Cassiopeia. Her tattoo. "I don't understand," Alara whispered. "Neither do I," he admitted. "But I think someone wanted to hide something from me. From us." "Us?" she repeated, her pulse quickening. Nico's eyes met hers. "I need to know who you are, Alara. Who you really are." Later that evening, she sat at her apartment window, the city lights shimmering like constellations below. The business card he'd left burned in her pocket. Nico DeLuca, private line, embossed, precise, cold. Her thumb brushed over the raised letters as she replayed his words in her mind. He thought she was connected to his wife. Maybe even... No, it was ridiculous. She knew who she was, didn't she? She had a birth certificate, childhood memories, family photos. Except, not many, and the ones she did have felt strangely distant, like scenes from someone else's life. Her father had never mentioned her mother much, just that she died when Alara was a baby. She'd never questioned it. But now everything she thought she knew about herself felt like a story told by someone else. She looked out the window at the city. Her reflection hovered over the skyline. Her dark hair, her amber-ringed eyes. Her mother's eyes, maybe. And she whispered, "Who am I really?" For the first time in years, the question didn't echo back in silence. It throbbed in her chest like a heartbeat that didn't belong to her. And this is where you have to wonder, if someone you barely knew looked at you and said they saw a ghost in your face, would you listen? Would you dig into the past? Or would you walk away and never look back? Because sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. It just changes everything you thought you were. That night, the rain came down hard, thick drops hammering against the city like the sky itself was trying to wash it clean. Alara couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the photo Nico DeLuca had left on the table. The woman's calm smile, her delicate wrist, the identical constellation of stars. Cassiopeia. Her tattoo, her story, her memory, or was it? At 2 a.m., she finally gave up on rest and sat by the window, her knees drawn to her chest. The glow from the streetlights spilled through the blinds, striping her face with pale gold lines. She traced the ink on her wrist, the way she used to trace the edges of her telescope when her father told her stories about the stars. "You're made of stardust, Elle," he used to say. "Even if you fall, you'll always find your way back to the light." But lately, that light felt distant. A memory instead of a promise. A knock at the door startled her. She froze. No one knocked at this hour. For a heartbeat, she thought she imagined it. Then it came again, louder, sharper. Alara moved cautiously toward the door. "Who is it?" Silence. She looked through the peephole, nothing but the flicker of the hallway light. Her pulse quickened. "Probably some drunk neighbor," she whispered to herself. Then, a soft thump. A small package slid under her door. Alara stared at it, her breath catching. The box was plain, unmarked, sealed with brown tape. No address, no note. Every instinct screamed not to touch it, but curiosity, or maybe fate, made her kneel and pick it up. She peeled the tape slowly. Inside was a single object, a photograph. She turned it over in her trembling hands. It was old, the colors faded, edges creased. In it, a woman held a little girl, maybe 3 years old. They stood on a lakeside dock, the sunlight turning the water into silver glass. Alara's throat closed. The child in the photo had her eyes, amber-ringed, unmistakable. And the woman? The same woman from Nico's photograph. Sophia. Alara's mind went blank. She dropped the picture, hands shaking. Another object fell from the envelope. A small folded paper. She opened it carefully. Written in neat handwriting were 4 words. The truth is waiting. No name, no signature, just that message. The air felt heavier suddenly, as if the walls were pressing in. She looked around her small apartment. The crooked bookshelf, the cracked mug by the sink, the telescope gathering dust in the corner, and realized how fragile her entire life suddenly felt. She grabbed her phone and, before she could second-guess herself, dialed the number on Nico's card. It rang once, twice. Then, "Alara," he said her name like he'd been expecting her. "There's something you need to see," she said, voice trembling. "Where are you?" "At home. I'm sending someone to get you." "No," she said quickly. "I'll meet you, somewhere public." A pause. Then his voice softened. "There's a cafe on Westfield and Rosemont. 1 hour." The line went dead. By the time Alara reached the cafe, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and shining under the lamplight. She spotted Nico immediately, sitting alone at a corner table, his black coat draped neatly over the back of his chair, a cup of espresso untouched in front of him. He stood as she approached. "You shouldn't have come alone." "I don't take orders from you," she said, surprising herself with the bite in her tone. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded as if approving of her defiance. "You said you had something to show me." Alara placed the photograph on the table. Nico's eyes darkened. "Where did you get this?" "It was left at my apartment door. No name, no note, except this." She handed him the small folded paper. He read the words silently, his jaw tightening. "The truth is waiting," he repeated under his breath. "Do you know what it means?" Alara asked. His gaze lifted to hers, sharp, haunted. "No, but whoever sent this knows too much." "Too much about me," she whispered. "About us," he corrected softly. Something in his tone made her heart skip. He leaned back, his eyes searching hers. "Tell me again about your parents, the people who raised you." "My father was an astronomy professor. He died when I was 20. My mother," she hesitated. "She died when I was little. Car accident." "What was her name?" "Grace Quinn." He nodded slowly. "And before that?" "Where did you live?" Alara frowned. "Chicago, mostly. We moved around a lot." "Do you remember the addresses?" She tried to think. "Not really. I was too young." He exhaled through his nose, frustration etched across his features. "Someone has gone to great lengths to keep you hidden, Alara." "Hidden from who?" she asked. "From me." The way he said it sent a chill through her. Nico reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. He tapped the screen, and a few seconds later, another man entered the cafe. Tall, broad, dressed in a dark suit. "This is Victor," Nico said. "He'll take you home and make sure you're safe." "Safe from what?" Nico's eyes softened just slightly. "From the people who don't want you to know the truth." Alara shook her head. "I'm not going anywhere with one of your men." Alara... "No!" she snapped. "You show up out of nowhere. You tell me your wife had the same tattoo, and now someone's breaking into my life with pictures of a woman who looks like me. You don't get to control what I do." For a second, she expected him to lash out. Instead, Nico leaned forward, voice low, steady. "You think I want control? I want answers, just like you." The words hit her hard because they were true. Beneath his authority and menace, there was something else. Grief, maybe. Loss. "Please," he said, "just let Victor take you home. I'll find out who sent that package." Alara hesitated, staring at him. "Why do you care so much?" Nico's eyes locked on hers, dark and unflinching. "Because if I'm right, then you're not just some stranger who happens to wear my wife's tattoo." Her heart pounded in her ears. "What are you saying?" she whispered. "I'm saying," he said, leaning closer, "that you might be the reason my wife died." Outside, thunder rumbled faintly in the distance, even though the rain had long since stopped. Inside, the cafe was silent, every word between them crackling like electricity. Alara swallowed hard, whispering, "And if I'm not?" Nico looked at her for a long moment, long enough for her to see something raw behind his calm exterior. Then, "I've just risked everything for a ghost." For a second she didn't breathe, and then she realized she didn't know which possibility scared her more. "And right there, before we move on, think about this. If someone told you your entire identity might be a lie, that your whole life was built on someone else's secret, Would you want the truth no matter the cost, or would you rather stay in the dark, safe inside the lie? Because sometimes knowing who you are means losing who you've always been. The drive back to Alara's apartment was a blur of city lights and questions that wouldn't stop spinning in her head. Victor, the man Nico had sent, didn't speak. He simply watched the road with a calmness that made her uneasy. The rain had thinned to a drizzle, tapping gently against the car windows like restless fingers. When they pulled up to her building, he stepped out first, scanning the street before opening her door. "I'll walk you up." "That's not necessary," Alara said quickly. His reply was quiet, but firm. "Mr. DeLuca insists." Something about the way he said it, "Mr. DeLuca insists," made her realize that whatever Nico wanted, people simply did. Inside her apartment, everything looked the same, but it felt different now. Smaller, tighter, like the walls had been holding their breath while she was gone. Victor checked each room before nodding. "All clear." Alara frowned. "You make it sound like I'm in danger." He met her gaze evenly. "You might be." Then he left, closing the door behind him. For a while, Alara stood in the silence, listening to the rain, to the hum of the old fridge, to the sound of her heartbeat echoing in her ears. She looked again at the photograph, the woman's soft eyes, the child's tiny hand gripping her arm, and that familiar tattoo, the same stars, the same wrist, her wrist. She needed answers. The next morning, the city was draped in mist. Alara hadn't slept, but she went to work anyway, mostly because she didn't know what else to do. The cafe felt strange without Marco's usual chatter. He noticed instantly. "You look pale," he said. "You okay?" "I'm fine," she lied. "Just tired." She didn't tell him about the photo, or the man who claimed she might be part of his past. She wasn't sure how to explain any of it. It sounded insane even in her own head. But as she poured coffee and wiped tables, she couldn't stop replaying Nico's words. "You might be the reason my wife died." What did that even mean? And why did his voice sound more broken than angry when he said it? By mid-afternoon, the doorbell above the cafe jingled, and Alara looked up, expecting Nico. But it wasn't him. It was a woman, tall, elegant, wearing a long coat and sunglasses despite the gray sky. She approached the counter with a calm that felt deliberate. "Can I help you?" Alara asked, her polite tone hiding the unease in her chest. The woman smiled faintly. "I'm looking for someone. Alara Quinn." Alara's hands froze around the coffee pot. "That's me." The woman nodded. "Then this is for you." She slid an envelope across the counter, thick, cream-colored, her nails perfectly manicured, and without another word, she turned and left. Alara stared after her. "Wait! Who sent—" But the door had already swung shut. The envelope was heavier than it looked. Inside was a small key and another folded note. The handwriting was the same as before. "Storage Unit 317, Westfield Depot, midnight." By midnight, Alara's nerves were stretched so thin she could hear her own pulse. She told herself not to go. She told herself to burn the note, to forget it, to go back to pretending her life was ordinary. But she didn't, because something deeper, something pulling, told her she had to. The depot was silent when she arrived, the kind of silence that felt alive. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as she walked past rows of storage units, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. Number 317 sat near the end of the row. She fit the key into the lock, her fingers trembling. The door rolled up with a groan. At first glance, the unit looked empty, just dust and shadows. But then she saw it, a small metal box sitting on the floor, covered in a thin layer of grime. Alara crouched down and opened it. Inside were papers, photographs, and a flash drive wrapped in a faded silk scarf. She lifted the scarf and froze. It smelled faintly of lavender and smoke, the same scent that had lingered on the envelope she'd received the night before. Her breath quickened as she unfolded the papers. They were birth records. Her name, her date of birth, but under mother's name. Not Grace Quinn. It said Sophia DeLuca. Her hand shook so hard she nearly dropped the page. She scanned the rest, hospital details, an address, signatures. It was all there, authentic, detailed, real. A whisper left her lips. "No!" No, this isn't possible. Footsteps echoed behind her. She spun around. Nico stood in the doorway. How did you? She started. I told you I'd find out who sent the package, he said. I didn't expect you'd come here alone. He glanced at the documents scattered across the floor. His expression darkened. You found it. I found this. She held up the paper, voice trembling. And it says your wife was my mother. Nico took a step closer. Then it's true. No, she said quickly. It can't be true. My father was Thomas Quinn. He raised me. Do you remember him clearly? Nico asked quietly. His face? His voice? Ilara hesitated. She could picture moments. His laughter, the telescope, his rough hands. But when she tried to see his face, it blurred like a dream fading at dawn. Her breath hitched. What did you do? I didn't do this, Nico said. But someone did. Someone who wanted to erase you from my world. The anger in his voice wasn't directed at her. It was aimed at the ghosts in his past. Suddenly, headlights flashed through the gaps in the depot wall. A car screeched outside. Nico's eyes snapped up. Get down! A split second later, glass shattered. Bullets tore through the metal door, sparks flying. Nico grabbed Ilara and pulled her behind a stack of crates. Stay low! Her heart hammered as gunfire echoed in the vast room, deafening. The smell of gunpowder filled the air. After what felt like forever, silence fell, broken only by the sound of retreating tires. Nico straightened slowly, scanning the area. They're gone. Ilara's hands trembled. Who were they? People who don't want us asking questions, he said grimly. He turned to her. We can't stay here. Come with me. No, she said weakly. This is insane. You think this is coincidence? Nico snapped. The photo, the package, the records, now this? Someone's been watching you, Ilara, waiting for the moment you'd start digging. Her breath caught. Then what do we do? He extended his hand. We stop running. We find the truth. She stared at his hand, strong, scarred, and steady, and for a heartbeat, she wanted to take it, not because she trusted him, but because she didn't trust anyone else. Finally, she whispered, Okay. His fingers closed around hers, firm and protective. Good. Then we start tonight. As they stepped out into the rain-soaked night, Ilara realized something terrifying. Her life wasn't just unraveling. It was rewriting itself in front of her eyes, and for the first time she wasn't sure she wanted to stop it. And maybe this is where you ask yourself, if you uncovered proof that your whole life had been built on a lie, would you dig deeper, even if it meant danger? Or would you walk away before the truth destroyed you? Because sometimes, curiosity doesn't just kill the cat, it kills who you used to be. The drive from the storage depot felt endless. The city blurred past in streaks of neon and rain, the hum of the engine the only sound between them. Ilara sat in the passenger seat, her hands gripping the edge of her coat, her pulse refusing to slow. She'd seen the documents with her own eyes, her name, her mother's signature, Sofia DeLuca. If that was true, then the man sitting beside her wasn't a stranger. He was blood. But every time she tried to believe it, something inside her resisted. They turned down a narrow street, pulling into the underground garage of a tall, glass-walled building. 2 guards stood waiting, both armed, both silent. This is your house? She asked quietly. Nico nodded. Safer than yours. He stepped out and opened her door himself. The gesture was unexpected, almost gentle, but his expression was unreadable. Inside, the place looked nothing like she'd imagined a mafia boss's home would. No velvet curtains, no gold, no signs of power, just concrete, steel, and the faint smell of old smoke. He led her through a long hallway lined with photographs, most of them black and white. One made her stop. It was a candid shot of a woman laughing on a pier, hair blowing in the wind. Sofia. Her fingers lifted toward the frame, almost touching it. She loved the water, Nico said softly behind her. Said it reminded her that even calm surfaces can hide storms. Ilara turned. She looks happy. She was, he said, until the day she wasn't. They stood there for a moment, 2 people bound by a name, separated by a lifetime of silence. Finally, Nico motioned toward a door at the end of the corridor. Come, there's something you should see. The room he led her into was dimly lit, filled with files, photographs, and a wall covered in maps and strings of red thread connecting them. Alara's breath caught. "What is all this?" "My wife's case," he said. "The police called it an accident. I called it murder." He pointed to a photo of the lake where Sophia's car had been found. No skid marks, no witnesses, and the car doors were locked from the outside. She didn't crash. She was forced off the bridge. Alara's eyes moved across the evidence. Newspaper clippings, autopsy reports. And then she saw something that froze her blood. A surveillance photo, grainy and dark, taken near the same lake. A man stood beside the railing, his face half turned. Familiar. It was her father, Thomas Quinn. Alara stumbled back, shaking her head. "No, that's impossible." "I found this 6 months ago," Nico said quietly. "I didn't know who he was until you said his name." "He wouldn't—" "Alara," Nico cut in, his voice firm but not cruel. "The man you called your father may have been part of what happened to my wife." Her heart thudded painfully. "You're lying." "I wish I were." He handed her a second photo, clearer, closer. Her father and Sophia laughing together at a cafe table. The caption on the back read, "Zurich, 1998. That was 2 years before Alara was born. Her hands trembled. She knew him. Yes. Then who was he? "An informant," Nico said. "He worked for one of my rivals, someone who wanted leverage over me. When Sophia vanished, he disappeared too." Alara stared at the photo, trying to make sense of it. "You think he took me?" Nico's silence was answer enough. She sank into the nearest chair, her head spinning. "All these years I thought he saved me. But maybe he was just hiding me." Nico crouched beside her, voice low. "I don't know why he did it. Maybe he wanted to protect you. Maybe he was afraid of what would happen if I found you. But either way, he kept you alive." Tears welled in her eyes. "Then everything I remember was a lie." He hesitated, then reached out, his hand hovering near hers before pulling back. "Not everything." Their eyes met, and for the first time she saw the man behind the name, not the Mafia boss, but a father who'd buried his grief under rage for years. "I thought I'd lost everything that day," he said. "And then you walked into that cafe." Alara wiped her cheeks with the back of her sleeve. "If all this is true, what happens now?" "Now," Nico said quietly, "we find out who really killed her." Later that night, after Nico retired to his office, Alara wandered through the apartment restlessly. The city lights glittered through the tall windows, painting silver reflections across the floor. She stopped at a piano sitting untouched in the corner and ran her fingers across the keys. A note lingered in the air, soft, uncertain. "Beautiful," a voice said behind her. She turned to see a man standing in the doorway, younger than Nico, with kind eyes and a disarming smile. "I'm Matteo," he said, stepping forward. "Nico's brother." She blinked. "He never mentioned you." Matteo chuckled softly. "He doesn't mention much. He thinks silence keeps the monsters away." Alara smiled faintly despite herself. "Does it?" "Not really," Matteo said, "but it keeps him busy." He studied her for a moment. "You have her eyes, you know." "Whose?" "Sophia's," he said. "When you walked in tonight, I almost thought—" He stopped himself. "Never mind." They talked for a while, about music, about the cafe, about the quiet ways people survive grief. For the first time since this began, Alara felt something like calm. Then, as Matteo stood to leave, he said, "Be careful who you trust here. Not everyone wants the past uncovered." Alara frowned. "You mean Nico?" Matteo's expression softened. "No, I mean me." And then he walked away. That night, Alara dreamed of water, cold, endless water, and a woman's voice whispering, "Find me." She woke with a start, drenched in sweat, the city still dark outside. In the quiet, she thought of Matteo's words. Not everyone wants the past uncovered. She rose, her bare feet silent on the marble floor, and wandered into Nico's study. Papers were scattered across the desk. Files on Sophia, on the DeLuca family business, on a shipping company called Ravel Enterprises. She frowned. The logo was faintly familiar, a pattern of stars, Cassiopeia. Her breath caught. Couldn't sleep? She spun around. Nico stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. I was just looking, he finished. I'd expect nothing less. He crossed the room slowly until he stood right in front of her. You're like her, you know. Always chasing answers. Alara's pulse quickened. Maybe that's why someone wanted her gone. Nico's gaze darkened, but not in anger, in pain. Maybe? They stood so close she could feel his breath. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them shimmered with something they couldn't name. Grief, recognition, maybe even desire. Then, softly, Nico said, "If we're going to survive this, you have to trust me." Alara searched his face. "And if trusting you gets me killed, then we'll die knowing the truth." His hand brushed hers, a fleeting, accidental touch that left her pulse racing. She didn't know if she could trust him, but she knew one thing. She was already too deep to turn back. And maybe that's the moment you ask yourself. If you uncovered a truth that bound you to the very person you feared, would you still follow it? Would you keep digging, even if the next secret broke your heart? Because sometimes, the twist isn't what you find. It's who you find standing beside you when you do. Morning came gray and heavy, the kind of light that made everything look washed out and uncertain. Alara stood by the window of Nico's apartment, watching the clouds gather over the city. Below, traffic crawled by, people hurrying somewhere, anywhere, but not here, not inside this silence that stretched like a held breath. She hadn't slept. Every thought chased another, her mother, her father, the man who claimed to be both her enemy and her blood. The documents, the photographs, Mateo's quiet warning echoing in her head. Be careful who you trust here. Behind her, the door opened. Nico stepped in, jacket over one arm, a phone pressed to his ear. "Yes," he said to whoever was on the line. "Keep it quiet for now. I'll handle it." He hung up and looked at her. "You haven't eaten." "I'm not hungry," she said softly. He nodded once, studying her face. "We found something. The company listed in the files. Ravel Enterprises. It's connected to someone close to me. Too close." "Who?" He hesitated. "Mateo." The name landed like a stone. Alara blinked. "Your brother?" Nico's jaw tightened. "He's been moving funds through shell companies. The same ones that paid off the investigator who declared Sophia's death an accident." Her stomach turned. "Are you sure?" "I wish I wasn't." He turned to leave, but she caught his sleeve. "If that's true, then he's been lying to both of us." Nico's eyes softened. "I need to see it for myself." When he left, the apartment felt colder, emptier. Alara stood there for a long time before she realized her hands were shaking. By afternoon, she couldn't sit still. The weight of waiting pressed against her chest. So she went wandering through the apartment, through halls filled with echoes of a life that wasn't hers, but felt tethered to her bones. She found herself back in the study, the one with the wall of red strings and photographs. Her gaze drifted to one pinned photo at the edge, a grainy image of a child in someone's arms. The caption read, "S. DeLuca, Zurich Hospital." The baby's wrist was turned slightly toward the camera. There, faint but visible, was the same star pattern, Cassiopeia. Her breath caught. "It can't be." She touched the image as if it might tell her something. But before she could think further, a voice said quietly behind her, "You found it." Alara turned. Mateo stood in the doorway, his smile thin, careful. "You shouldn't be here," he said gently. She stepped back. "You told me not to trust anyone." Mateo sighed. "I said not everyone wants the past uncovered. That included me." Her pulse quickened. "Why? Why hide it?" He came closer, not menacing, but deliberate. "Because some truths don't set people free, Alara. They break them." She shook her head. "You knew I was her daughter." "I suspected," Mateo said. "I wanted to be sure before Nico found out. He's built his whole life on grief. If he knew the woman he loved had been living a double life, married to him and working against him, it would destroy him." Alara felt her knees weaken. "You mean my mother betrayed him?" Mateo's silence was answer enough. "She wasn't just his wife," he said. She was the one feeding information to your father, Thomas Quinn. The night she disappeared, she tried to run. From both of them. Alara's voice broke. And I was caught in the middle. Yes, Matteo said softly. You were the secret she couldn't protect. He looked almost sorrowful. If Nico learns the whole story, he'll see her as the enemy. I'm trying to spare him that. You're lying, Alara whispered. You're protecting yourself. Matteo's smile faded. Sometimes those are the same thing. Before she could answer, he slipped out the door, leaving her alone with the photographs, each one now heavy with meaning she didn't want. By the time Nico returned that evening, she was waiting for him. Where were you? She asked. Trying to confirm what I already knew, he said. His expression was unreadable. Matteo's gone. Gone? He cleared out his accounts. The people we trusted to protect this family, they were all on his payroll. Ilara swallowed hard. He told me about my mother, about her working with my father. Nico froze. He what? He said she was playing both sides, that she was trying to run from you. For a moment, the room was silent except for the sound of rain against the windows. Nico stepped closer, his eyes sharp. And you believe him? I don't know what to believe, she snapped. You keep saying you want the truth, but all I get are half stories and secrets. His jaw tightened, and something in his face cracked. Not anger, but pain. You think I wanted any of this? You think I wanted to find you this way? Through lies and blood? Alara turned away, her vision blurring. Maybe it's better if I leave. He caught her wrist gently. If you walk out that door, you'll disappear the same way she did. She pulled her hand free. Maybe that's exactly what needs to happen. Nico's voice softened. Alara, listen to me. I don't know who was lying. Maybe your mother betrayed me. Maybe Matteo did. But you... He paused, searching for words. You're the only piece of her that's still real. The words hit her like a wave she didn't see coming. She wanted to scream, to cry, to stay, to run. But all she could do was whisper, Then why does it hurt so much? He didn't answer. That night, Alara packed a small bag. She left quietly without another word, stepping into the rain-soaked street. The city lights shimmered off the pavement like reflections of a life that might never have been hers. She walked until the buildings changed, until the noise faded, until she found herself on the riverbank. The water moved slowly, heavy with memory. She sat there until dawn, watching the first light stretch across the water. And somewhere deep inside, she realized she'd reached the point of no return. Everything she'd believed was gone. The family she'd lost might never have been what she thought. The man she'd begun to trust might never forgive her for being a part of it. The river whispered, You can't go back. And she whispered back, I know. And maybe that's where you pause for a second and ask yourself, if every truth you discovered only brought you pain, would you still chase it? Or would you let it go, just to keep your heart intact? Because sometimes, the deepest darkness isn't what surrounds you. It's what you find when you finally look inside. The first light of morning stretched over the city like a slow breath, brushing gold across the rooftops and the river's shifting skin. Alara sat on the stone embankment, her knees drawn up, her coat soaked through with dew. She hadn't moved all night. The sun's warmth touched her face, and for the first time in hours, she closed her eyes. The river sounded almost like her father's voice when he used to whisper stories about the constellations, low, steady, certain. Cassiopeia always finds her way back to the sky, he used to say, even when she's upside down. Alara breathed out slowly, her tears drying in the sunlight. Upside down, she murmured. Yeah, that sounds about right. When she finally stood, she felt lighter. Not because the confusion was gone, but because she'd stopped running from it. She knew what she had to do now. No more believing half-truths. No more hiding in other people's versions of her story. She needed proof, not memories, not guesses. Evidence. By mid-morning, she was back in the city, walking through streets she'd memorized years ago. She stopped at a small public records office near the university. The same one where her father used to bring her to look at star maps when she was little. The clerk behind the counter looked bored, his tie crooked. Can I help you? I hope so, Alara said. I'm looking for birth records from Zurich. dated 28 years ago. Name, Alara Quinn. Or possibly, Alara DeLuca. The clerk raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. He disappeared into the back, leaving her alone with the hum of old computers and the faint smell of paper and dust. When he returned, he handed her a thin file. There's a record for Alara DeLuca, Hospital of Zurich. No official adoption papers filed afterward. Strange. Though, the record was sealed by request. By who? He checked the note at the bottom of the file. A Thomas Quinn. Her breath hitched. My father. He nodded. He must have had powerful connections to seal a foreign record like that. Alara thanked him and left. The folder clutched to her chest like a fragile heartbeat. Outside, the city felt different, sharper, more awake. Every street corner seemed to hum with possibility, with hidden meaning. She ducked into a small park, sat on a bench beneath a willow tree, and opened the file. There it was again. The same pattern of stars, stamped faintly on the top corner of the form, Cassiopeia. But this time, it wasn't just decoration. Under the logo were words, Ravel Foundation for Child Protection. Her stomach dropped. Ravel, the same name from Nico's documents. The company that had paid off the investigator. She flipped through the pages until she found a line at the bottom that made her blood run cold. Custody transferred under emergency protocol. Guardian, Thomas Quinn. Signed by Matteo DeLuca. Matteo. He hadn't just known. He'd been the one who arranged her disappearance. The pieces slammed into place so fast it almost hurt. Matteo had hidden her. Her father had raised her under a false name. And Nico, the man she'd thought might destroy her, had been searching for her all this time. Alara's hand shook as she pulled out her phone. She hesitated only a second before dialing Nico's number. He answered on the second ring. Alara? I found something, she said breathlessly. Ravel Foundation. It's a front. Matteo used it to move me out of the country. He signed the custody transfer himself. Silence stretched on the line, thick and heavy. Then Nico said quietly, Where are you? She told him. Stay there, he said. Don't move. Nico? But the line went dead. Minutes later, his car pulled up at the edge of the park. He stepped out, his coat unbuttoned, his hair damp from rain. He looked less like the untouchable man she'd met weeks ago, and more like someone carrying the weight of too many ghosts. She held out the file without a word. He took it, scanning the pages, his eyes darkening with every line. When he finally looked up, his voice was low. He took you from her, from me. And hid me, Alara said quietly. Maybe he thought he was saving me. Nico exhaled sharply, his jaw clenched. He was saving himself. Alara sat back down on the bench, the strength draining from her legs. You were right. Someone wanted me hidden. But you were wrong about who. Nico sat beside her, the folder still in his hands. I thought revenge would give me peace. But now... He looked at her, his expression unreadable. Now I just want to make it right. Alara turned toward him. We can still fix this. How? By finishing what she started. His eyes softened. And what was that? Finding the truth, she said. All of it. They sat there for a while, watching the rain begin again, soft, almost cleansing. For the first time since she'd met him, Alara didn't feel like she was standing opposite him. They were on the same side now. That night, back at Nico's apartment, the tension felt different. Not sharp, not heavy. Quiet. Hopeful. Alara sat at the piano again. Her fingers finding a melody she didn't know she remembered. It was simple, gentle, something her mother might have played. Nico listened from the doorway, a faint smile touching his lips. She used to play that, he said softly. Alara looked up. Then maybe she's still here, somewhere between us. He walked closer, resting a hand on the piano's edge. You sound like her. Maybe I got that from you, she said without thinking. He froze. Then, almost to himself, he murmured, Maybe you did. For the first time, the silence between them didn't hurt. It just existed, steady, alive. Later, Alara stood on the balcony watching lightning flicker in the distance. The city shimmered below, alive and unbothered by their story. She touched her wrist, tracing the stars of Cassiopeia, and whispered, I'm ready now, ready to know. Ready to forgive. Ready to face whatever waited on the other side of truth. Because she finally understood something her father had never said but had always meant. You can't erase who you are. You can only learn to carry it. And maybe, just maybe, the stars on her skin weren't a mystery to solve. Maybe they were a map leading her home. And maybe that's where you pause, right here with her, and ask yourself, when everything falls apart, what brings you back? Is it revenge? Is it love? Or is it simply the courage to keep standing even when the ground shifts beneath you? Because sometimes, strength isn't loud. It's the quiet decision to start again. Night draped itself across the city like a curtain, stitched with lightning. From the balcony of Nico's apartment, Alara watched the storm gathering. The wind carrying the smell of wet stone and something electric, change. Inside, the lights were dim. The piano she'd played earlier still held the ghost of the last note, a sound that refused to fade. Nico stood at the window behind her, his voice quiet. Matteo called. Her stomach tightened. He wants to meet? He said he's ready to tell the truth. Alara turned. And you believe him? I don't know if I believe anything anymore, Nico said. But we can't finish this story without hearing him. Alara nodded. Then we go together. He met her eyes, and, for a moment, all the storms in the world felt like background noise. They met at the old DeLuca estate on the outskirts of the city. Once a mansion, now a shell. The windows were boarded, ivy strangling the iron gates. The place smelled of rain and memory. Matteo waited inside the great hall. Candles flickered on a long dining table, their flames trembling in the draft. He looked older than before, his charm stripped down to exhaustion. I didn't expect you to come, he said. Nico's reply was calm, steady. You called. We listen. Matteo's gaze shifted to Alara. You look so much like her. It's like seeing a ghost. Alara stood straight. You took me from her. He shook his head. I saved you from her choices. Explain, Nico said. Matteo exhaled, rubbing a hand across his jaw. Sophia was caught between worlds. She loved you, Nico. But she also feared you, the Empire, the enemies, the violence that came with your name. Thomas Quinn offered her a way out. She planned to leave everything behind. You, me, the family business. When she realized she was pregnant, she hesitated. She told me she wanted her child safe from all of it. She begged me to make it happen. Alara's voice trembled. So you lied to everyone. I forged the records, arranged the adoption, convinced Thomas to take you and disappear. I thought I was doing what she wanted. And the car crash? Nico asked. Matteo's eyes flickered toward him. That wasn't her. I staged it to close the story. I never expected you to keep looking. The words hit the air like thunder. Nico's hands curled at his sides, but his voice stayed low. You let me bury an empty coffin. Matteo's eyes shone with remorse. I thought grief would make you stop. I was wrong. Alara stepped closer. You made him live with ghosts. You made me live a lie. You took 25 years from us. He nodded once. And I'll live with that until I die. But you needed to be free. She stared at him, her anger and pity fighting for space. Free? You don't free a person by erasing them. The thunder outside rolled closer, rattling the windows. Nico finally spoke, quiet but sharp. You could have told me. You would have gone after her, Matteo said. And she would have run farther. I was protecting you both. By destroying both, Nico said. The silence that followed was thick with rain and regret. Matteo lowered his gaze. I can't undo it, but I can give you what's left of her. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a locket, silver, worn smooth from years of touch. He opened it, revealing 2 photos. A younger Nico on one side, a newborn on the other. Alara's breath caught. She kept this with her the day she left, Matteo said. It was the only thing she wouldn't let me destroy. Nico took the locket slowly, his thumb tracing the curve of the tiny photo. She was coming back, he whispered. Yes, Matteo said. The night before the crash, she changed her mind. She wanted to tell you everything, but by then, it was too late. The storm broke. Rain hammered the roof, echoing through the empty hall. Alara stepped forward, her voice shaking. So what now? We know the truth. What do we do with it? Nico looked at her, really looked, and the answer came out quiet but certain. We stop letting the past decide who we are. He turned to Matteo. You'll leave this city tonight. Don't contact me again. If you want redemption, find it somewhere else. Matteo nodded, tears glinting in the candlelight. She'd have been proud of you both. He walked away, his footsteps fading into the storm. For a long moment neither Nico nor Alara moved. The thunder softened. The candles flickered. The air felt lighter, as if the house itself had been waiting for confession. Alara spoke first. She wanted peace, not war. Nico nodded. And now she has it. He closed the locket and placed it gently in her hand. It's yours. Alara shook her head. No, it's ours. They stood together in the middle of that ruined hall, two survivors of the same secret, bound not by blood alone but by the choice to forgive. Outside, the rain began to ease. Through a cracked window, a single star broke through the clouds, Cassiopeia, tilting across the night. Alara looked up and smiled faintly. She's home. Nico followed her gaze. So are you. They left the estate before dawn, the road slick but empty. The city lights welcomed them back with a quiet glow, as if the world had been waiting for them to finish this chapter. Back at the cafe, hours later, Alara unlocked the doors for the morning crowd. The smell of coffee filled the air, grounding her. Nico stood by the counter, sleeves rolled up, awkward in a place so ordinary. You ever made coffee before? She teased softly. He smiled, a real, unguarded smile. No, but I'm willing to learn. She handed him a cup. Then start with this. He tasted it, grimaced slightly. Too sweet. That's the point, she said. After everything bitter, you need something that reminds you life can be soft again. Nico laughed quietly. Maybe that's what she saw in you. Alara looked at him, warmth stirring in her chest. Maybe that's what she left in both of us. The bell above the door rang, and the first customers trickled in, unaware that the people behind the counter had just rewritten the ending to a decades-old tragedy. And this is where you pause for a breath. Because maybe you've felt that moment too, when the storm finally breaks and the truth stands bare. If forgiveness was standing in front of you, would you take it? Could you let go of everything that hurt you just to feel light again? Because sometimes the most powerful victory isn't revenge, it's peace. The cafe smelled of roasted beans and morning rain again. Sunlight streamed through the big front windows, cutting through the steam in soft ribbons. Alara wiped the counter with easy, familiar motions, her hair falling loose over her shoulder. For the first time in what felt like forever, her hands weren't shaking. The bell above the door rang. Nico stepped in. No bodyguards, no shadows trailing behind him. Just him, wearing a dark shirt rolled up at the sleeves, looking almost ordinary. He smiled faintly. You start earlier every day. Somebody has to keep this place running, she said. He moved to the counter, watching her pour 2 cups of coffee. You still make it too sweet, she grinned. It's a reminder. He took a sip and nodded. I think I'm starting to understand that. The simple moment, the sound of cups, the low hum of the city waking up, felt sacred somehow. The noise of their past was gone, leaving only the quiet of 2 people learning how to exist in peace. When the morning rush ended, Alara hung her apron and joined him by the window booth, the one he'd always chosen when he was still just the mysterious man at table 7. Outside, the street was alive with motion. School children running, an old man feeding pigeons, life happening without drama or secrets. She turned to him. What will you do now? Nico stared at his hands for a long moment before answering. I've spent years trying to build something strong enough to protect the ghosts of this family. Maybe it's time to build something that actually lives. Alara smiled softly. That sounds like something she would have wanted. He looked at her and the hint of a smile reached his eyes. She would have liked you. You have her stubbornness. And your habit of brooding, she teased. For the first time, he laughed. A real laugh, the kind that filled the empty spaces in the air. It was deep and honest, and it made her laugh too. The sound startled them both into silence again. But it was the good kind of silence, the kind that didn't need to be fixed. A few weeks passed. The papers that told the story of Sofia DeLuca's disappearance and the corruption that followed made their way quietly to the authorities. Matteo vanished overseas, leaving behind letters that confessed to everything. The Ravel Foundation was dismantled, its name scrubbed from the records. And for the first time, the DeLuca name began to mean something different. Something steadier. Humbler. Ilara kept working at the cafe. She said it was because she liked the smell of coffee and the rhythm of ordinary days, but really it was because it kept her grounded. Sometimes, when the morning light hit just right, she caught a glimpse of herself in the reflection of the window. Hair pulled back, a faint smile on her lips, eyes no longer haunted. And she realized she was becoming someone new, someone free. One evening, after closing, she sat on the floor of her apartment surrounded by old boxes she hadn't opened in years. She found her father's telescope, dusty but intact. She carried it up to the roof, the night warm and still. The city below glowed like a sea of stars. When she looked through the lens, Cassiopeia shimmered above, right where it always had been, 5 bright points forming a crooked W in the sky. She whispered, "You were right, Dad. The stars never forget where you belong." A quiet voice behind her said, "Mind if I look?" She smiled. "I thought you didn't care for stars." Nico stepped closer, his shoulders relaxed. "I'm learning." He bent to the telescope, the glow of the city catching the edges of his face. "I see it," he said. "She looks like she's smiling." Ilara nodded. "She always does." They stood side by side, the night wrapping around them like a promise. Neither spoke for a while. The world felt smaller up here, safer, as if the universe had bent just enough to make space for both of them. Finally, Nico said quietly, "You know, I spent years chasing revenge, thinking it would fill the emptiness. But it wasn't revenge I needed." "What was it?" she asked. "Forgiveness," he said. "Hers, yours, my own." Ilara looked up at the stars. "It's easier to forgive when you understand the story." He nodded. "And you understand now?" She turned to him, her eyes shining. "I do, and I think she'd be proud of us." He smiled, a soft, tired, peaceful smile. "Then we did something right." Weeks turned into months. The city moved on. The cafe thrived. And every now and then, people who came in for coffee whispered about the quiet man who always sat by the window, reading old newspapers, and the woman who ran the place like it was the center of the world. They never guessed what kind of story had begun there, how much loss, how much forgiveness, how much love had been brewed into every cup. Ilara didn't correct them. She didn't need to, because she'd learned something her parents hadn't lived long enough to teach her. Peace doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without pain. One late afternoon, a soft rain began to fall again, just like that first day. Nico closed his newspaper and looked toward the window. Ilara was wiping down tables, humming to herself. She glanced up, caught his gaze, and smiled. In that moment, everything else faded, the storms, the lies, the questions. All that remained was this: 2 people who had found each other at the edge of loss and chosen, every day since, to stay. And if you were sitting there watching them, maybe you'd wonder, after everything they went through, would you have done the same? Would you choose forgiveness over fury? Love over fear? Because sometimes the real ending isn't about what you uncover, it's about what you decide to keep. And Ilara Quinn, no, Ilara DeLuca, kept the only thing that mattered: peace. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.